Welcome to the Growth Whisperers, where everything we talk about is building enduring great companies. Not fast companies, not growth companies, but enduring companies. Maybe it encapsulates those other things, but overall, it's enduring companies, companies that will last. My name is Brad Giles, and as always, I'm joined today by Kevin Lawrence, my co-host. Hello, Kevin, and how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Brad. Yeah, it's awesome. We're coming into summer here. Vancouver had a pretty good week last week. Really good and excited actually about what we're talking about today. It was triggered by a conversation with another client and talking about some of the headaches they're having. And we're hoping to provide a little bit of antidote to some of the headaches that some people feel today, which we'll get into in a few minutes.
Oh, yes. It's an interesting subject. But as always, before we start, we like to begin with a simple word or phrase to kick us off, as we advocate people do in their meetings. So, Kev, what is your word or phrase for today?
Mine is inspired. It's interesting as I think back over the past week, there's been a bunch of different people that have really inspired me. Whether it's action that they're taking. My daughter, I think may have got her first employee in her business, and she's 15.
Awesome.
So that's kind of cool. And my son and I were having just a ton of fun, father-son driving around. We're both into sports cars and racing, so we're having some awesome father-son drives around. And a friend that I got together with, I haven't seen for a while, we did some inspiring stuff. Got a little bit sketchy. We were up doing some off-roading up in the mountains. We got in some pretty steep mountains with my new vehicle, which was it was actually a ton of fun. But just being back and rekindling old memories and some other friends this week, because we're kind of going into a bit of a lockdown, so we have to be very careful about what we do. And when we see people, obviously keeping appropriate distance and stuff. But yeah, it's inspired by some really amazing people around, and my team just inspires me constantly with the stuff that they're doing and the feedback. It's this combination. I need to make a new word, which is a combination of inspired and grateful all mixed together. But I'm insanely impressed by these awesome people I'm surrounded by. It's both in work and in life. It's awesome. And you're one of them, Brad. You inspire me with the way you think and the way you make stuff happen. You're one of those people that I'm also is on that list of awesomeness around me.
Well, very grateful for your kind words. Thank you. And I return the volley. My phrase is growth versus momentum. We spoke about that before this podcast. I was in a strategy planning workshop with a team last week. I've been working with them for about 8 years, and it really felt like we'd transitioned from growth to momentum, meaning that there are, we're going around the team, and there are just awesome little things that are happening in all sorts of parts of the business. And we've got this great inertia, this great momentum, and it feels so different. So growth is nice, but momentum is awesome. Just that sense that you get in the business when you're getting it, when you've worked so hard for so long and you're getting it right. And there is just this self inertia that is growing all parts of the business.
Yeah, there's a lot of wind at your back with that momentum, and it feels, growth is kind of like, if you're on a bicycle and you're riding up the hill and you're climbing. And it's working, and you're getting there, and same with your mountain biking, and you're mountain biking through trails, and you're pedaling, and you're getting where you want to go. And I was watching a video today of a run in Whistler Mountain called A-Line. It's a mountain bike, and I remember doing this when I used to downhill mountain bike. But you get momentum, you start flying down, and the gravity is pushing you, and you're flying. It's a spectacular run. Those of you that have been on A-Line, it's an amazing ride. But it's almost like it's that feeling of going downhill versus uphill. In both cases, you got awesome movement. It's just about what the gravity is doing for you. And the gravity is at your back in the best way when you've got that momentum. It's a great, great feeling.
It is. Okay, so cool. On to today's episode. I do love this one. It is, who's in charge, you or your calendar? Who's in charge? Who's running this show? So often we see people, and let's be fair, we've both been a victim of this, right? But so often we see people and their calendar doesn't align with the most important things. Someone says, hey, Kev, I'm wondering if I could pick your brain about something. Have you got any time next week? I don't know, like maybe for an hour or something like that. We could just catch up. And then you look at your calendar and you go, yeah, okay, I got time on Tuesday at 11. Now you multiply that by 20 over and over and over and over again, and you are not in control of your calendar.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's easy to feel, and I do feel victim to my calendar sometimes because it's full. I like to do a lot of things and help a lot of people. And, it's very easy if you're not careful to get dragged through the week by your calendar versus you being in charge and leading it. And that's what we're digging into today. And it's not just time management. This is about being strategic about your time versus reactionary about your time. And it's something that we need to continue to do. In front of me, I have my goals for the quarter for work, self, and life. I keep them in front of me to remind me. On a Post-it note in front of me, I have my 3 key outcomes that I need to pay attention to this month that we're in, that's coming to a close soon. And I've got those 3 things I got to get done to remind me, because, as you and I have talked many times, Brad, is that we do lots of work on strategic planning for companies, and we do goal setting for leaders and executives and CEOs around work, self, and life so that they can live a great life and obviously take care of themselves so they can stay resilient, like we talk about in your oxygen mask. But you got to then bring that to life, because you can have this perfect plan. But if your priorities on your plan don't look like the stuff that's in your calendar, you got yourself a problem. It's not going to work. You're not going to achieve what you want, and you're going to be busy with a whole bunch of extra stuff, which might seem really important, but maybe not relevant. So important, relevant to your strategy is an important distinction. So, Brad, anything you'd like to add to this?
Well, not really. I think you've covered it pretty well, but I think that we jump straight into it. Again, who's in charge, you or your calendar? So the first thing that we're talking about here is the think-do ratio. That's fascinating, Kevin. Tell us a little bit about the think-do ratio.
Yeah, we're really, as a leader, and this is for leaders, not for people on the very, very front lines. As leaders, you're supposed to spend time thinking and planning how to make things better, and what are the winning moves, and how do you change the role of your team. And what happens with a lot of people, and when we do strat planning sessions and people lay out their strategic goals, they're like, I don't have any time to do them. I'm so busy in my day job, I don't have time to work on those projects. And what I answer is like, oh, well, that means you probably are so busy doing, you don't have any time to do any thinking or planning. You're too much of a doer, really not having enough time to be a leader. And I understand it. I fall into that sometimes myself. Please, I'm not judging you. We're all in this together. But it's this think-do ratio. What should it be, right? For a CEO, their doing should be very tiny, like tiny, tiny, tiny. And a lot of thinking and discussing and working with other people. Where a frontline technician should be doing a ton of doing. What happens though is, as executives grow through the roles, their think-do ratio doesn't transition, and it's just look at their calendar, because their calendar is often full of a lot of doing.
So, how long should you prepare for a meeting in thinking? That's what I asked in my book. Your Oxygen Mask First is your book. My book is called Made to Thrive. But yeah, that's what I asked there. And you can't really be prescriptive, but it's probably a bit more than most people are doing now. So what I asked is, if you had a 1-hour meeting with someone, should you prepare for 5 minutes? Well, that's probably not enough if you want it to be meaningful. People say that meetings are one of the worst things that they do. And I reckon one of the reasons is that people just don't prepare. And it's not just the person who's running the meeting. So many of the other people, if everybody prepared and came together, it would be an amazing meeting. It's the absence of preparation because people overcook their calendar, but they put too much stuff in the calendar that makes it horrible.
Right. Which is the thinking part versus the doing of showing up. And it's, and I suggest there's some meetings where 5 minutes is magic to think about what is my intent? What do I got to make? But if you're negotiating a $7.8 million, discount with a big vendor, we know you'll spend more than 5 minutes, or you're sure as heck better if you're going to be successful. Luck goes to the prepared. So it's that time in your schedule to do that. But most people get so bogged down in doing, they don't have the time for thinking. And I think, they're working with half their capability because they don't get time to act. And again, I fall victim to this sometimes too, or I'm responsible, but it happens in my world sometimes too, where not enough thinking, too much doing, and then you end up just executing and things gradually fade. You need the thinking to pop the quality or the strategy back up every once in a while.
I have a rule. I have a couple of rules around meetings. Number one is no agenda, no attender. Okay. So if
I like that. I haven't heard that before.
Yeah. So if you don't have an agenda for this meeting that you're asking me to come to, that you've sent to me so that I can think about, that you're not going to have an attender in terms of me, right? Because I need to think about it. The second one is I have meetings with clients that have standing agendas. So we would meet every single month, right? And so then I will always email them the day before and say, for example, so Kevin, in preparation for our meeting at 2 p.m. tomorrow, please let me know if there's anything out of the ordinary that you would like to discuss. And every single client, every single meeting, I will email them that. Because number one, the worst thing in the world is when someone forgets about a meeting or it's not on their calendar. So it's reminding them that it's on, number one. And then number two, I'd say about 40 or 50% of the time, they say something out of the ordinary that we're going to discuss or that's going to become a key agenda item that I can prepare for. I've already got, for my meeting tomorrow, I've already got a response today, and that's beginning to percolate in the back
That's
of my
great.
mind.
And the importance of that, for example, I have a client where we have a similar system. I don't tell people to respond. I just tell them to think about it and come. I like that question. Oh, it's a great question, Brad. Thanks for sharing that. But where we send, and we now don't have to send, we put in the meeting invite, the agenda for the meeting, and we follow the same agenda. We have a standing format we go through. Interesting. A new awesome CEO I'm working with, he was getting frustrated in the sessions. He didn't even know there was an agenda. So we miscommunicated, and because we weren't emailing them, they were in the invite. I'm going through the agenda and he's not with me. And then he's wondering what's going on. And I'm like, well, aren't you following the agenda? He goes, what agenda? I go, well, in the meeting way. So he wasn't. So now we're actually, to get him up to speed, we're emailing it to him. It's damn important, because the agenda is how, we send it to the clients to have them prepare for the meeting.
Yeah.
And he wasn't showing up prepared, but he didn't realize that it was in the invite and he hadn't looked at it. So it's our fault. We should have let him know. But it's super important. And I will tell you, in companies time and time again, meetings are a nightmare. And often because there's no agenda. And I say the same thing. If there's no agenda, don't go. Even when people want to talk to me, well, what do you want? If it's one of my clients, I said, I need 5 minutes. I'm going to say, okay, fine. I don't need an agenda. Because I know they have a specific, like today I was talking to a CEO I work with, and they had something important, and I said, hey, can I talk for a few minutes? I said, sure, fine. That's different. But if you want to, set a meeting, what is it we're going to cover? And for example, we ran a 2-day strategy last week with a group. We had 3 meetings in advance for a 2-day, with 3 meetings of at least an hour each to sculpt just the agenda points. Never mind the preparation. Yeah. And we had an awesome meeting, but we did a lot of homework just to get the agenda right. But we should. It's 2 days.
That's effectiveness. What comes to mind? Yes. I had a person who we both know, who I won't mention, who asked me for a meeting, and they were just like, "Hey, can we love to catch up? Can we meet on this date and this time?" And I'm like, "What's the agenda? What? You know,
Love to catch up. It's not a catch up. If there's something, let me know in advance.
I don't catch up. Like I
don't. I don't want to catch up.
No, I don't.
If I did, you're going to be one of my friends, and we're going to go have a beer or something. So, getting back to the root of it, you know, going even in think do ratio. Like number one is that your time for thinking is critical, but it won't happen if you don't have the discipline around other meetings and not allowing them to take your critical time. So, one of the first thing, you know, and the second thing is number two, does your calendar set your priorities, or do you set your calendar? If you set your calendar,
we need to build up the tension on that one. We need to make the audience really understand the weight of what you've just said. We need a drum roll or something.
Let's do it. Like I can do a drum roll. That's not really working very good. That's not making enough noise here. I can do a drum roll here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Because that's so important, right? Does your calendar set your priorities?
Is that better?
That's much better.
Way better?
Much better. That's so much better.
Yes. Who's the boss? Who's the boss?
Yeah.
Your calendar or you?
This is if you've got a pen, this is the one thing you've got to write down out of this episode, right? Does your calendar set your priorities, or do your priorities set your calendar? Why is that important? Because priorities is working broadly, in our definition, working on the business. Okay. So what is the most important thing that you've got to do to work on the business broadly? What is the most important thing that you decide that has to be done? As opposed to, as we said earlier, someone ringing up and say, "Hey, Kevin, do you want to catch up? Just love to catch up." And I don't know.
It's proactively putting in the things that matter most first.
Yeah.
And again, it's not rocket science. It's just hard to do. And what that looks like is you have to pre-block things in. So as an example, you know, with my team and our quarterly goals, I've got stuff pre-blocked in. Like I know I have in my calendar this week, a half a day session on a strategy on the people side of the business. It was booked a couple months ago, and we've got time to go through and work on some of the stuff you and I were talking about before the show.
Yeah.
But it's in there. Right. And it's pre-scheduled before other things go in. And same with my one-on-ones with my team. I've got a one-on-one with my team where we go through all the stuff that's working and not. And it's in there to help, because that's a key part of success as our firm is my team being. And it's not rocket science. And same thing with us, you and I do in this podcast. You got to block in these things, because all the other stuff will fill in all the cracks real fast. So these are all things we know. The key thing to ask yourself is, am I proactively blocking in the strategic things that matter most in my calendar that help me to hit my goals? Which is, it could be your personal goals, and that could be your workout, or it could be your life goals, and that could be time with people that matter a lot in your life, and obviously your work goals. So it's incredibly important. And again, that's why ideally a lot of the highest performing people we work with, they have their annual goals, quarterly goals. Many will have a monthly version or a monthly target, and then weekly goals and daily goals.
So maybe,
and the calendars reflect that.
And that's my point. And so maybe for you, look at your calendar over the last week or two. How many of the appointments in your calendar or blocked out time or notes align with your quarterly, your annual, your 3-year goals for your organization? How many of the things that you're spending your time on actually align with that? Now, let's say that it's 80% of the things that are in your calendar don't align and only 20% do. And maybe what you can do is set yourself a goal to say, what about if in 1 year's time, I can flip that and I can have 80% of the things that are in my calendar actually align with the goals for the organization that I'm working on, rather than these ad hoc catch-ups or things that are not necessarily working on the business, or to use Stephen Covey's terms, are important but not urgent.
Mm-hmm. And that ratio will depend on your role.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you're a CEO, most of your stuff you're working on should be 1 to 3 to 5 years in the future and very strategic, most like 80% plus, right? And you're going to have some stuff around the day to day, but a true CEO with a capital C is forward looking and strategic most of the time. And as an executive, that will notch down a little bit. As a director, a notch down. As a manager, you might be spending 80% of your time, 20% of your time on some of this strategic stuff might actually be really good for a manager, depending on the size of the company. So it's different based on your role. The question is, how do you get it to ideal? A key thing, a key activity, which I'm in needing to do again, and I will in the next month or so, is to build out what your ideal calendar is.
Yeah.
Literally, what would it be? Forget about the constraints of today's. And I love to take people three years in the future, because today kind of vaporizes. And so what would your ideal calendar look like? And if you look at how you're allocating your time, and interestingly, for what it's worth, in the field that we're in, I ideally, to be my best, have Fridays free. Right? Fridays is a flexible day when I do my strategic stuff and my thinking time and other work. But sometimes, based on how stuff gets scheduled, I don't have that flex day on Fridays. And then it's harder for me to do all the thinking stuff and the on the business things I'd like to do. So no matter what I do and how well I block my calendar, if I have, time every day of the week with clients, which I love and I enjoy it. And that's the thing. I love my time with my clients. They're awesome people. I enjoy the work, but then I don't have enough time to do my job as a leader of the firm. Right. So, and that's problematic. So by setting your ideal calendar and having an idea of what that looks like, it does set you up to win. Another person I know in a more of a delivery role was saying something similar. They're spending so much time delivery, they never get to their administration, never mind their proactive thinking. So again, everyone's got their own version of it, and you have a good sense of what you need.
Awesome. So closing that out, are you working on things that are important and not urgent? That's the goal. All things that are important and urgent. That's where humans just unfortunately get dragged into.
It is.
So Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is where that concept comes from. Encourage you to kind of look in there if you're interested. Let's move on.
For sure. Yeah.
So what do we got next, Kevin?
Yeah, I'm looking to head down for number 3. It doesn't feel as relevant right now. That's more of a productivity thing. Maybe we get as a sidebar, but a productivity hack. In a session I was in this week, we were talking about a great book on productivity called Getting Things Done by David Allen.
Oh, I love that book.
A great system. Yeah, it's a great book. It's a lot. It's a pretty technical system. It's a little much for a lot of people, but the essences of it's good. But he has a phrase in there, Brad, and you might remember the right version of that phrase, but it's basically a system for touching things once. So, and the one thing he had a more sort of a filing system of that I used for a while. It faded away, but the thing that stuck was open up an email, action it right now.
Yeah.
Get a piece of paper, action it right now. So my insurance paper comes in for insurance on a vehicle. I take a picture and instantly text it to my insurance agent, who's awesome. And then it's handled, right? It's literally open it, see it, picture, send it, say, please insure it. And then it's done versus, oh, I'll send it to her later.
Yeah.
Right. Things like touching things once. Now there's a key is, you can also touch things once and send it out, but it's only half done, i.e. someone's going to come back with 4 questions. And that's the art of touch it once and with everything that it needs. So that's a beautiful piece around personal productivity and from a very good productivity book.
Yeah. Love that David Allen book, Getting Things Done. It's just, I've read it and applied several points to that, including his filing system, which is just fantastic. But let's move on. So draft.
So let's go. Like we've done number 5, which is, what's your perfect calendar for 2022 even? Like, what would it ideally look like for you to be your best? And, in that strategic time you have, what it would have. Number 6 is, is in your calendar. It's either short meetings or no meetings.
Mm-hmm.
So we go back to, you said, no agenda, no attenda, or no attender, whatever, agenda. I love that. That's one piece. But other things is, how can you actually not even have a meeting? Like, is there a way to resolve it without meeting? And sometimes, some people, it's a quick phone call. Like literally just imagine this, pick up the phone and call somebody. And what I notice is, the clients of mine that are older than I am, by default, just pick up the phone and get stuff done.
Yeah.
And very, very quickly. The younger people, they're more likely to text and try, which both can work. But at some point, is there a way we can do it without a meeting, right? Or can we do it in a 5-minute meeting? I love 5-minute meetings. Let's talk for 5 minutes, get it sorted out, move on, right? And I'm an impatient person by nature, but basically, how do you not get into the trap of the default 30-minute or 60-minute meeting and avoid them and only do them if they're needed?
They aren't needed. They aren't needed. I don't really love the Slack kind of communication world, which is just text. It's just like text. An interesting thing I read a couple of weeks ago was that the number of people who buy a new phone and never take it off silent ever is actually skyrocketing. So people who just leave their phone on silent 24/7 all the time because they only use it for texting or the internet.
As in for not receiving phone calls.
Yeah, it never ever rings.
Yeah.
They don't even. It just never ever rings. And that's a societal change that's happened. So people are moving away from phone calls a little bit, but sometimes you can just really make a big difference with that quick phone call. You've got to create a high barrier to entry for your time, for your calendar.
Yes.
It's got to be difficult to get a meeting. They've got to go over a number of hurdles.
They need to, yes, there needs to be a process to filter it so only the important meetings get through. That's why in my world, Janice is my right hand is the person that sets those meetings. And she knows she needs to get a few pieces of information before she schedules me with anyone. And even when I do tell her to set a meeting, I tell her whether it's an A, B, or C priority. Like go ahead.
I tell you something. I was last week. I went to a book launch, something that's quite rare where I live. Business book launch, even rarer. Yeah. Lovely book from No to How. It was called by a great guy, Adam Mullet. But met with a person there, really lovely guy. We were chatting and, he had an interesting job and he wasn't a CEO, didn't have his own business, but even if he didn't, I don't really do necessarily a lot of networking in person. And we were just chatting about strategic planning and stuff like that. And he said, I find this really interesting. I'd love to catch up for a coffee one day. And I just recoiled. I was just like,
yeah. I don't do that.
I don't. I don't catch up for people I don't know for a coffee. Like I never do that because my calendar is too precious. Even if you want to work with me, I'd be highly reluctant to meet with you.
I don't. And my thing, if there's something, and I believe there's some potential value for either party.
Yeah,
definitely, it's a phone call.
Yeah.
Get on the phone for 15 minutes. If there still is, then we'll set up another phone call.
We've got to protect it.
Well,
got to protect the calendar.
That's the main thing. You got to protect your time and your calendar and make sure what gets in it deserves to be in it. Number 2, that it's done efficiently and effectively.
Yep.
And by the way, don't be afraid to end a meeting early. If someone's not prepared, and it's one of the things I've seen, if someone's not prepared and you're protecting your calendar, and it's like, if you're finished early, awesome. That's great. But also if somebody isn't prepared, okay, hey, I can see, I was expecting this to be fully laid out with A, B, C, but my miscommunication, I'm sorry, maybe I didn't make that clear enough. So how long do you need to get it together? Great. Good. So let's plan on Thursday. I'll see you then. I'll book a time.
Here's the thing. If you turn up to a meeting and someone says, okay, so what are we here to talk about? That should be like a siren going off in the background.
But that's common, Brad. People don't know. And even when we have strategic discussions, I do a lot of debate time with executive teams that I work with and CEOs. What are we trying to achieve with this discussion? What is the outcome that we want? By the way, we do that before so people can prepare. And then, okay, what is the action?
Yeah.
Like, what is going to happen so we don't waste this time? So but basically, you got to be very protective of your time, of people that want it. But more than that, you need to pre-plan the time you need for strategic things. So short meetings or no meetings is our next point, and it's critical. And there's nothing like a quick call sometimes, or telling them to make the call.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I need to talk to you about this. It's like, okay, hey, I trust you. You make the decision. And if you're deeply concerned, tell me your two options and we can discuss it. But I'm pretty sure you can handle this.
Yeah.
On certain things. Sometimes people just want too much feedback. But if we were to sum this up, Brad, if you look at your philosophy of, because we all have the same amount of time, and there's a stat of the 168 hours a week that it's the same for all of us. But if you're looking at optimizing the time that you work, what would be the number one message you would have for people?
I would say, number one, what gets measured gets managed. And so understanding where is the slippage in your calendar? How many of if you were to color your calendar, imagine you printed out your calendar and you colored it all. How many of these meetings are working on the most important things? How many of these meetings are catch-ups or superficial, or someone trying to sell you something or something like that aren't necessary? And then how many of those meetings could have been a quick phone call? How many? Because a phone call you can end after 5 to 7 minutes, right? A meeting, yes, there is more of an obligation to go through a certain rhythm that you don't need to. So that's what I would say. What about yourself?
Yeah, first of all, and in this virtual world that we work, there's an opportunity for a lot. It's easier to have shorter meetings. And that is the massive efficiency that I have found in this working digitally almost all the time. You lose some stuff, but the efficiency is notable. I would say is that, think of your calendar like a strategic tool. Like in my case, I block my vacations. That's the first thing that goes in my calendar, the time for myself and my family. And I set those times aside. That goes in first. And then it goes into all the other things almost in order of value. But it's fiercely protective of that calendar and only letting the right things in. And a lot of those niceties just aren't needed. And again, being fiercely protective when someone wants to meet with me. Why? What are we going to cover? How long do we actually need? Right. And again, if it's one of the CEOs I work with, it's like, what do you need? And I'll jump on the phone like ASAP. That's different. Yeah. Because I know it's critical. That's a different thing. That's a key. But yeah, just being really diligent about it. And it's almost like every meeting in your calendar costs you $100. Yeah. Literally, if you think about it, like energetic currency, like don't take it unless you know it's going to be really valuable and that the people are going to be prepared to make a good use of the time. Just be vigilant about your calendar versus accommodating is what I would say.
All right. Awesome. So with that, let's just say, look after your calendar. Let's close by saying that. Look after your calendar. So with that, if you would like to learn more about Kevin, first of all, I encourage you to check out his book, Your Oxygen Mask First. Also, he's available at lawrenceandco.com. For myself, my book is called Made to Thrive. And my website, Brad, is evolutionpartners.com.au. It's been such a pleasure to chat to you today about your calendar, setting the right priorities. We look forward to chatting again next week to you about another interesting subject about building enduring great companies. Until then, have a great week.